This is RTV, and I'm going to talk about the elections, the midterm elections. This is November 15th, 2022. Now, I want to talk about Kari Lake and the fact that she just officially, I say that in quotation marks, lost her race. I knew during the counting of the ballots that the same shit that was going on in 2022 was happening again. I'm sorry, in 2020 was happening again in 2022. This time with Kari Lake. I didn't buy the whole thing that people were saying. The view that like Kari Lake and a lot of them were saying, especially Blake Masters and Adam Laxalt, that they knew that the votes were coming in. Like, who was telling them that they were going to have these votes? Like, what is this multiplication they came up with? I don't know. I have no idea where any of this came from. But what I do know is that I knew when they stopped the count at 88% that they were going to cheat. At least in my opinion, they were going to cheat. It's just that those states are the same exact states that were accused of cheating or voter fraud or whatever you want to call it in the 2020 election. So if the same exact states are involved, except for one, doesn't that raise some sort of flags in your head that there was fraud going on? I mean, the reason why Brian Kemp, this is the thing about Georgia. Georgia was one of the states that was questioned in the 2020 election. But Brian Kemp it wasn't a governorship race for him. It wasn't a Secretary of State election for Raffensperger. So, if that's the case, then it would seem to suggest that they were in cahoots with the establishment to steal the election from Trump in 2020. Because Brian Kemp had issues with Trump, and also because he's a rhino, he's an establishment person, right? So after the election, what does he do? Well, he changes the election rules. He reinforces the election to be fair and secure for real, not for the media's version of it. And he won. And as for Herschel Walker, well, that doesn't really matter. Herschel Walker wasn't a very good candidate anyways. And there's a large black population in Georgia, so that's a factor too. Doesn't matter about the voter fraud, there's a factor in that too. But that also comes together with the mail-in ballots, which is, they are harvested, all right? I know the system they use, and that's how they, whenever you're arguing about ballot harvesting with people, they'll talk to you about generalizations and the fact that a lot of states have these laws and everything else, but it's not about that. It's not about just having mail-in ballot laws that open it up for that. It's the kind of laws you have, the way you use those laws. States like Arizona, Nevada, used to be in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, I believe. All those states have very open laws for mail-in ballots. And some of them have very open voter ID laws. So in Arizona with Kari Lake, I knew the same shit was going on in 2020. And I knew because not only do they have very open laws for mail-in ballots that are very susceptible to ballot harvesting, but their voter ID laws are basically all you need is two forms of identification. Other than, you can use any type of identification, but you just need two forms of identification. I don't even think you need a photo ID, right? So that what that means is that opens it up for people that are non-citizens to vote. This is in a state that has a large amount of illegal immigration. It's also a state that I think is actually the headquarters of the, the American. It's like the branch of the Mexican cartel, the drug cartels. I believe their headquarters are in Arizona, in Phoenix, I believe. So it's no surprise that not only did Kari Lake lose officially, but the propositions that are being voted, they voted down having actual voter ID laws, which would have forced people to show their, government ID, like a driver's license, and I think other things also to that. And they also voted to give illegal aliens college tuition. It's in-state college tuition. So in a red state, how is this possible? How is it possible in a red state that is having issues with legal immigration that they voted for all these things? I don't think it is possible, unless, of course, illegals voted. And then people say, well, the big thing is, well, they voted, but there was no fraud, and in fact, it's the independents, right? The independents, which make up a big portion. Like, Republican registration is actually the majority, but it's plurality, meaning that it's not above 50, I believe. So it's like a pizza pie version of the voter registration, right? So what that means is that there's a lot of independents who vote in the Arizona elections. Okay, so what kind of independents are these? This is the state of Barry Goldwater, who was like a proto-libertarian. This is the type of independent you would think you'd have, right? A liberal conservative, if that makes any sense to people. Or should I say, a libertarianism is kind of a Arizona thing, right? A right-wing liberalism. I don't know how you would call it, but, like Arizona is like a libertarian state. Just that they voted Republican because libertarianism is not, the Libertarian Party doesn't win elections. So, if that's the case, historically, then how is it that these people voted for progressive things? Why would they vote for progressive things? Why would that make any sense? Why would a libertarian vote for property rights? I mean, vote against property rights, against citizenship. People say, well, the Libertarian Party has become more progressive. It's true. It's possible. But that still doesn't make any sense, because the type of libertarianism we're talking about is not Antifa. It's not like a leftist type of libertarianism. We're talking about a right-wing state with a right-wing libertarianism, right? So people say, well, it's because the Californians who have come into the state. Well, the Californians that have come into Texas and Florida, apparently those were right-wingers who kept those states red. But for some reason, Arizona has blue people leaving California. Maybe. It's possible. But I'm just not buying it. Because not only does that... here's the thing. You have to have enough of those people. You have to have enough of Democrats, enough of these independents that are liberal to change the election to one-sided. To me, the only way you can really do that is if you add illegal immigrants, because they are a factor. They are a very big factor in Arizona. And so you've had to add them. And in fact, like I've already mentioned, when it comes to the voting laws, and for what people seem to really be interested in this whole election in Arizona, because you look at the propositions, you can see what kind of people that are voting and why they're voting for. If you believe these ballots are legit, that is, all right? Even if they're not legit, that means if the illegals are actually voting, then you can tell they're voting because of what they're voting for, right? Illegals not going to vote for higher voting laws that are restricting more secure and fair voting laws, because that means that they don't vote. So, yeah, if you add liberals and these liberals and these independent liberals and you add illegals, then yeah, I can see the results you have. Especially if you this makes sense what I'm saying if Arizona in fact is still a red state, but is being filled with usurpers, in their population and all that. So it would make sense that way. So I'm not saying that I have proof that election fraud happened. I, of course, don't know because the only people that would know are the people that run the elections. And there are probably a bunch of people who work for obviously they work for the government. A lot of times Democrats are the ones who run elections because they're more involved with government and have been in almost every state. And they tend to be minorities. A lot of times the people that actually count your votes are minorities. So there's a lot of factors here that make it so that the people who are running the election are not going to actually run the election fair. Why would they do that? They want their people to win, right? It makes sense. I know that in third world countries, and I believe here in the United States as well, actually it does happen here in the United States with the unions, but a lot of third world countries, if you have a government job or they'll tell you that you will vote for a certain candidate because that candidate's the candidate that the government wants you to vote for. And I'm not saying that happens here necessarily, but I believe a very similar thing happens here, just in a different way. I believe voter fraud happens. And you know what, honestly, somebody had pointed out a lot of stuff when it comes to the voting that has happened for many years. I think it's been happening for many, many years, right? I think this is the status quo. When the Democrats say that, that you have to vote for democracy, they're talking about, they don't mean democracy like people voting, one man will vote. What they're talking about is the status quo. The status quo must stay. You enjoy your life as an American, you must keep that status quo. So vote for the Democrat Party because they'll keep that status quo. They are the establishment party. I'm not saying the Republican Party isn't part of the establishment, but they are right now. They have this. The view of the establishment is that Trump is this cancer, right? That needs to go away. And because Trump has infected the Republican Party, then the Republican Party isn't the establishment anymore. But the Democrats are, so you must vote for the Democrats. This is the mindset that they're trying to sell. The question is, did people buy it, right? Did the people buy into it? Well, reality is that more Republicans voted in this election than Democrats. In fact, the Republicans won last time I saw was 5 million votes over the Democrats, and somebody said actually up to 7 million now. Which means that Republicans won the popular vote. There was I won't say a red wave, but yeah, Republicans did in fact vote. Most Americans that voted in the midterms were Republican. So does that prove there was fraud? Maybe. People will say it was the districting of every place is what cut people off, cut everything up, right? The districting, of each place, right, and everything else. But you have to understand that congressional elections are popular elections, and the Senate elections also are. So what you're dealing with, basically, is the will that when you look at the popular vote, you're looking at the will of the people. The American people that came out to vote, they are mad. They don't like what's going on in the country, and they're not happy with Biden and everything else. But because maybe of districting and even more poignant to what I'm talking about, voter fraud. In this case, when I'm talking about voter fraud, I don't mean, to be clear, I don't mean fake ballots. I don't mean Dominion systems that are fucked up or any of that stuff. I can go into that later, but I mean ballot harvesting. So what is my point here? The point is that election fraud became an issue in the 2020 election based on the irregularities that were happening in certain states, certain key states. Again, these states are Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Okay. None of these states changed they really did anything to change any of the laws that were on the books, except for Georgia.